Hello, welcome to our latest episode of MQ Open Minds podcast. I'm absolutely delighted. Craig and I are delighted today. We've got the fantastic Gemma Oaten. So hello, Gemma.
Hi.
So now, really looking forward to our conversation, and I've obviously been doing some reading around and listening to some of the stuff you've been saying, actually over quite a few years now, in terms of your own mental health experiences. So maybe do you want to begin with just telling us a bit about, well, first of all, what got you and sort of involved in mental health research, or not mental health research specific, but mental health, sorry, as a campaigner and so on.
Yeah, definitely not mental health research. That's your job. I'm doing enough. I do not have the PhD. But yeah, my backstory really is at the age of 10 years old, it felt like out of nowhere developed anorexia, and before that point I had been just your normal kid on the block, not in that pop group sense, but just very, very content and very happy and bit of a tomboy, larking out with the lads, and I was never really the girl in the gingham dress with the pigtails, but I was so happy. And my mum and dad, amazing. My brother, I love him, but he did my head in. My two sisters, always fighting, but love them to bits. But in terms of the family dynamic, there was nothing untoward, going on. But what did happen was in the playground, and I kind of went from that tomboy to starting to blossom, for want of a better word, into a young woman, and along with that came the green-eyed monster, and the bullying began, and I remember very quickly, it was like, in hindsight, I didn't know it then. I couldn't articulate and understand what was going on then, but in hindsight, I believe strongly that my eating disorder developed because I couldn't control what people were saying or doing to me, but I could control an element of what went inside me. And at that point, when it was the anorexia, it was like the smaller I was, the safer I was. And mum and dad, because we were so close, they kind of spotted the warning signs very, very quickly, God bless them, and took me to the doctor.
So was this still around 10, 11?
Yeah, this is all about 10 years old. As I say, because there was such a big age gap with my siblings, I think there was like 10 years, it never felt like I was an only child, but I was with mum and dad constantly, 24/7. They were like my best buddies. And because they were so hands-on, it was very quick in terms of them going, we know something's not right, Gemma, let's talk about this. And that could have saved my life, but unfortunately the doctor turned us away because I wasn't low enough in weight to have a problem. Cut to a year later, I was given 24 hours to live and admitted to a children's psychiatric unit and put on bed rest, and that became the narrative of my life for 13 years. So in answer to your question, the reason I do what I do in terms of I'm the chief exec of Seed Eating Disorder Support Services. That was the charity that my parents set up because there was no support out there for us when we were going through it. And fortunately, I'm now well, and I've taken on that full sort of journey of hope and take on the baton from mum and dad, and I'm the one who's getting the grey hairs now.
I don't mention grey hair to me, certainly.
Die, babe, die. Don't die.
No, but to go back then, so that's, as you say, that's starting very young for the onset, obviously, of the symptomatology and your own struggles. So you're saying that, so were you then in and out of hospital then?
Yes, for 13 years. I nearly lost my life 4 times over that period, and it would be a constant cycle, Rory, of going into hospital or going to an eating disorder unit, being fed up, as in being refed, and being able to get to a point where I was medically safe. But what happened was, by doing that, this was never addressed.
Mhm.
So it was kind of like they were just papering over the cracks, and that was it constantly. It was like a roller coaster. And I remember my dad did a talk recently at one of our it was our 21st, celebrating our 21st year last year as a charity, and Dad did a talk to the audience, and he said his daughter had a death sentence, and well, you know, he said it's like his daughter was in prison, and he didn't know whether she would be on the death sentence, whether she'd get parole, or whether it would be a life sentence. That was basically me behind bars within my own mind for all that time, which is just, to hear a parent say that is so sad, but it just uncovers the magnitude of how devastating a mental health illness, an eating disorder, can be.
Well, as we know, I mean, the statistics are utterly heartbreaking as well. The number of people who obviously lose their lives to eating disorders. I think it's, and all the mental illnesses out there, is the most devastating. So it's amazing that you obviously your brushes with death, but thankfully are still here. So I'm just, so with that young age, though, Gemma, were you able to make sense of what was going on? You talked about your head there, whatever. So like 11 or 12, and like we understood why you were in hospital, or?
I felt like I was going, because I had no knowledge of eating disorders before that point. I think I'd seen a short documentary once, and it was filmed through the eyes of the girl who was struggling, and I remember saying to my dad, why would somebody choose not to eat, Dad? Like, what is she doing? You know, and like, that was all I had seen. So I wasn't aware of mental health really at that young age, and I wasn't aware of what an eating disorder was. So I just internalized it and just believed my own thinking that I was fat, I was disgusting. I looked in a mirror and I just felt so grotesque 24/7. All I would think about was how to disappear, how to avoid food. All I would, just strange, not strange to me then, but like constantly like holding myself and hunched up, like I literally would press my stomach to try and make it smaller. Like, that is how much I hated myself. So no, at that point I had no understanding of what was happening, and it was, I think for me, what was sad about the whole thing was that, and bear in mind I'm 38 now, so this is like 26, 27 years ago. And some things have changed, but not a lot, in my opinion. What was sad was that the healthcare professionals didn't understand it either. Because I know early intervention is key, and awareness and education is paramount to saving lives, and it just wasn't there.
Yeah, no, I'm going to come back to that, because I'm really curious. I mean, the work that you're doing with SEED, because that's part of it, about awareness raising, supporting families, and so on. And I want to come back to the access to healthcare stuff. But I'm just curious, so just before we do that, if it's okay, so do you, in your experience, and do you think that the stigma around eating disorders has got any less? Like, I'm just thinking now over that, you've got this journey now of over 20 years. What do you think about that?
It definitely has. It definitely has. If you know, when my recovery began, within 2 years I'd got to drama school, and within 3 or 4 years I was cast in one of the biggest soaps in the UK, Emmerdale. Now, at that point, I was being, I wouldn't say hounded, but everyone wanted to know who the new girl was. And they did some digging and discovered that Marja and my mum had an MBE. Why did she have an MBE? For services to eating disorders. Why did she get that? Oh, because Gemma had an eating disorder. And I remember when they first approached me to talk about an eating disorder, and how petrified I was, and how scared, and how I was worried that people would view me differently. And actually, if you'd have said to me like 10 years ago, like that I would be the CEO of my parents' charity, and I would be talking about this left, right, and centre, and knocking on doors to make sure I was heard, and shouting louder than I've ever shouted in my life, I wouldn't have believed you. So yeah, massively. There's still the stigma around the conversation is breaking, but where we're lacking is the treatment and support. So it's all well and good that more and more people are reaching out for help, but what's not great is that help's not there.
As someone who's actually in the entertainment industry, do you feel that that same industry has helped to worsen eating disorders?
In terms of the pressures of being in the industry, or in terms of films or dramas that you've seen?
More about being in the entertainment industry.
Personally, I've never witnessed it in that sense, and I mean that hand on heart. And I was kind of fortunate, really, because if anything, when I was at drama school, I was still quite small and childlike, and quite. There was a period of time where I wasn't doing so well at drama school, and I lost a lot of weight. And I remember actually one of my tutors saying to me, Jeremy, if you're going to survive and succeed in this industry, you need to be strong enough and resilient enough to deal with it mentally, but also in terms of castings, you need to be looking well, you need to be looking nourished. And I always remember that, and I was really sort of pleased and encouraged by that narrative. And then when I did, become sort of part and parcel of the British Soap Awards and the red carpet events and stuff, and even like photo shoots, I never ever once felt that pressure to be a certain way or type. And equally, for anybody who didn't see me in Emmerdale, Google Rachel Breckle, my character, because no makeup, hair scraped back, like made to look absolutely horrendous, and I was on TV in front of millions like that. So there was never any pressure on me, because I was on TV in front of everyone looking my absolute worst. So for me, anything was a bonus. But even in terms of what I hear and understand, in my experience, my industry within acting, not within dance world or modeling or all the other forms of media, because I know that the stories are very different there, but from my understanding in my world of acting, I've never experienced that.
So I'm just curious then, go back to your recovery, which is so what was the key to the success of your recovery then? So
I was in hospital around 15, 16, and mum being mum, Marge Oaten, there's a reason she got an MBE, decided that the treatment and support around eating disorders wasn't good enough. It was non-existent and more needed to be done. So she and Dad, whether he wanted to or not, were going to set up a charity. And bless them, they invested their own money, which we had very little of. And they set up Seed. And through them doing that, and by educating themselves about eating disorders, I mean, Mum went off to King's College. She trained in the Maudsley technique with Professor Janet Treasure, which is a technique that helps both the person struggling with an eating disorder and the carer or loved one communicate around what can be, well, we call it Seed walking on eggshells, because it's a complete battlefield. So going to that extent that they did, the reading, the understanding, the knowledge, they actually saved my life. I believe that, because it wasn't until they started to understand that in order to bring their daughter back, they needed to remember who their daughter was and speak to me as a human being. Whereas in all of these treatments that I would have, nobody spoke to me as a person. Yeah. Nobody encouraged me to think about anything other than weight gain or breaking behaviors, or my whole life was reward and punishment in that system, and it failed me badly. So my recovery came when Mum and Dad started to pull me back as a human being. And they took me out of an eating disorder unit when I was about 19, 20. I begged them to take me home. And if my mum didn't want to take me home.
Was she frightened? So your mum was in fear, yeah.
She was petrified. She was petrified. And I remember vividly, I was crying, screaming, begging. And I remember mum crying, screaming, begging, saying, Dennis, if we take her home, she's going to die. And I don't know how Dad knew. But he knew that if he didn't take me home, I was going to die, because I'd planned to take my own life if they didn't take me home. And they took me home. They gave me a chance, and they got me into therapy. Again, with a therapist who spoke to me about me as a human being. We very rarely, the only criteria was, and I understand it, was that she wouldn't see me if my weight dropped below a certain weight. And that was very hard. And sometimes it did, and she wouldn't see me. And a bit of a sore point, as you can imagine. But I believe it was the right thing to do, because what she did, she taught me how to start being accountable for myself. And that was the biggest, as a second to the being treated as a normal person, as a human being, that was the second biggest revelation for me in my recovery, was that I had to take responsibility and I had to be accountable.
Do you feel like the reason why they didn't speak to you like a normal person is because you were so young?
No, because I was still going through this when I was 16, 17, 18, 19. Like, I just, sadly, a lot of the healthcare professionals, unless they've had lived experience, it's very difficult to know how to treat somebody with an eating disorder. And it's viewed as an illness about numbers and about scales and about food. And actually, food is the symptom, it's not the cause. And I've said it many a time in interviews I've done, and most predominantly in the TEDx talk that I wrote myself. And I did that 3 years ago, and I wrote the words, waiting for the weight to change isn't going to change what is already there, but the longer we wait. And when it comes to eating disorders, the longer we wait, the more of a hold it has on that person, and the more expensive it is going to be to bring that person back. And I mean expensive in every sense of the word expensive. And that just wasn't understood.
I think there's something about I think we look at the mental health field more broadly over the last 10 or 20 years. And you're obviously going back about 20 years ago. I think one of the things I think has changed definitely for the better is that more holistic, person-centered approach of really, exactly, because sometimes, because I think sometimes we get so focused on one aspect, you're saying on the weight gain or whatever, there were certain indicators which were seen as indicators of improvement, when actually it ignores the breadth of us as individuals, as people, and that sort of that can be much more compassionate. And I think that hopefully, I think that has changed. But I mean, that's so eloquent how you've described it, Gemma, in terms of, I mean, I love that form of words to think about it. And just, don't depersonalize an individual, don't reduce a person to a set of numbers, because we're obviously all so much more complicated than that. So I mean, that's amazing. Because even I was watching there the piece you did last year, Lorraine, or for Mental Health Awareness Week last week, you did something in schools, I think.
Yes. With Dr. Alex George.
That's exactly one. But again, some of the messages you were trying to convey there are not that dissimilar, but part of it is challenging the stigma, getting over the misinformation. And I think maybe then we link that into the amazing work that Seed is doing. Can you tell us? I know it was started by your family now. What did you say? It's the 21st anniversary.
That was last year. So we're 22 years old now. So
can you maybe tell us about? So it started in Hull. Is it now broader than Hull, or what? And so tell us about what it does. I have some idea, but so our listeners and viewers will know.
The the mission statement, as it were, for Seed is that we treat the person and not the eating disorder. And with the work that we do, there is no threshold. Nobody is turned away. We support not just the parents and loved ones, but also those struggling with an eating disorder. We are there to bridge that gap, because sadly, it's all based on lived experience, and we see it time and time again. Waiting lists for CAMS, for mental health services, they're just too long. And then by the time they actually get there, they're too poorly to even receive therapy and treatment, because they are at crisis point. And then equally, for those who don't meet the threshold of being low enough in weight, because newsflash, there is eating disorders and disordered eating around binge eating, bulimia, ARFID, which is avoidant restricted food intake disorder, OSFED, which is other specified feeding eating disorders. Even more so now, the idea of somebody can be called atypical anorexia. So that means that they may live in what is deemed by society as a normal body, or live in and with a larger body, but they can still have anorexia. So making sure that nobody is left to get to crisis point. And we do that with a mixture of email buddy schemes, text buddy schemes, support groups all around the UK in terms of the joy of technology now. So we help people UK wide. A lot of people come to us who just want information, and we provide a lot of self-help on our website. It's the second most visited website to beat, which is the National Eating Disorder Charity. And then we've got the Eating Disorder Educational Toolkit, which is the resource you were talking about there, which I spoke to Dr. Alex George about on Lorraine.
Yeah.
And that is a resource to enable the teacher to teach responsibly and confidently about eating disorders, well-being and body image, because it's such a complex and highly misunderstood mental health illness. And also, in our day and age, you say the wrong thing, especially when you're in education, and that's not going to go down well. And a lot of teachers, unfortunately, are scared to even broach that subject. But then that's only perpetuating the problem, because then they're not addressing something that is happening right in front of their nose, And then the latest thing that I developed over lockdown, and we've just been commissioned by the whole East Riding CCG to deliver, is a programme called The Recovery After the Recovery. And it was something that I kind of dreamt up during lockdown, because when the pandemic hit and I was living on my own with my dog, just kind of spending most of my days in my bedroom alone, it brought back a lot. It brought back a lot of stuff. And I suddenly thought, God, I'm in a place where I've got the tools and the skills that I need. And I know when to pick up the phone to my therapist. I know when to reach out. I know when something's not quite working. There are so many people who are still in the thick of an eating disorder, but that lifeline that they had in services have been cut off, or there are people who are developing eating disorders and can't even access treatment now because of COVID. And equally, there are those who leave services but don't know how to live. Like, I was institutionalized for 13 years. When I finally went off to London, my mum had to write me a 20-page handbook. I didn't have a clue. And so we've created this program that is very, very hands-on, holistic, but it's not really factored around food management or food at all.
Practical things.
It's about
life.
Getting back into school. What does that person want? Is that goal that they want to start going out for a coffee with friends again? Right, let's look how we do that. Is that goal that they want to go back to school after leaving services, but they can only do 1 day a week at the moment? Right, let's look at how we can get to 2. That person who wants to go for a job and get back into employment, but doesn't have a clue how to even begin or have the confidence. It's about that. So that is what Seed does. And we face challenges all the time, especially around funding. Like, you'll probably know yourselves, like, we were staring down a barrel of a gun at the start of the pandemic. We've got no government funding at all. We did, and that was cut about 3 months ago, which is just that's maybe a podcast for a whole other day. So that is our biggest challenge, but we're run by a small team or me with a big gob who says there's no option to close, so we're not. And we.
But I mean, deadly seriously then. So financially, how are you looking at the minute then? Still struggling?
Oh yeah, massively. I don't know. I don't know how we do it. We had a partnership with the City Healthcare Partnership in Hull, and we had that partnership and contract for 10 years, and then out of nowhere they decided to tell us via Teams that contract was going to end, and they were going to put that money into a daycare service that only helps 5 people at any one given time.
Wow.
That £40,000 gone just like that. So we are fundraising. We're looking at the whole idea of corporate partnerships, pleading to anybody who will listen. But I'm at government level now. I've been invited to number 10 twice in the last month, and we're being heard and we are respected, and we will get back. So
yeah. But in terms of the waiting lists and needs and so on, I know anecdotally there was definitely evidence of in adolescent populations, CAMs were becoming overwhelmed with girls primarily presenting with eating disorders, and that was on the increase during the pandemic.
yeah.
Now, I don't know if that's anecdotally, but have you a sense from the people, the visits to your website and people accessing the resources, did that increase during the pandemic? It has, yeah, you're seeing that as well. Yeah.
Massively,
yeah.
Especially in school-age children, which is that just breaks my heart. And then you factor into this. I don't know if you know of Nikki Graham, but she sadly passed away. It's just been a 1-year anniversary actually, and she passed away from anorexia, and that I did a lot of press interviews around that with the blessing of Nikki's family, and that saw our referrals just go through the roof as well. But the pandemic and lockdown did end Nikki. It did. She needed to work to keep well. That was her driver. That was her motivation. And when the work stopped and she was on her own, that's when the eating disorder went, right, I've got you now. But again, sadly, she didn't get the help that she needed quick enough. The services failed her badly.
Yeah, no, it's a waiting list problem. We just cannot shout that loud enough about. We should, because you cannot have waiting lists. I know CAMs in general. I know lots of in Scotland certainly, and I know all our stories in England of waiting lists of over a year for getting access to CAM services. Yeah, that's just unacceptable when people are so vulnerable, and I think we need to, even more so than ever, we need to do as much as we can to get more into CAM services, but also the charitable sector and your organizations like yours, which are filling this gap of because we're not doing enough in the statutory sector.
I said when I was at number 10 the last time, I was invited by the PM special advisors, and the conversation came up around calories on menus, and what can be done. And I said, look, I'm not here because I know there's been some campaigns and they've had a big backlash. Like the government have been bruised badly by this. So I didn't want to go in there all guns blazing saying you shouldn't have done this and you shouldn't have done that. What I said was, right, you have made a choice to do this. I don't agree with the government's obesity strategy. I think it's been rushed and ill-advised, but what you do need to take and be accountable for is that you can't address that and not address the other. You can't address the physical and not look at the mental health side of the impact that is going to have on so many people around the UK who suffer with disordered eating. But also you can't just address going on at corporates and getting this money put out there to deal with a problem, well, that you feel is a big problem on the NHS and the government and the economy, and then not look at the severe lack of funding and support for the voluntary sector who are there as a first port of call, because these people can't get help. And then the economy suffers even more because they're losing money, because people can't work, because kids can't go to school, because parents have to stay off, because another bed needs to be utilised. Like, if you put that money into also working with the voluntary sector, this isn't just about eating disorders, by the way. This is all voluntary sector organisations.
I know, absolutely.
But the whole thing is like, it's nonsensical. So that's the approach that I'm trying to get the government to understand, that they need us. Because at the end of the day, I hate talking money. Money is the bane of my life, like in my personal life, in my work life, in the voluntary sector. I hate money, but unfortunately, we need it to get stuff done. Yeah. And to me, it makes no sense how they're looking at it, because the money that it is costing them to not give the money to the charity sector is tenfold more.
But you made the point already, Gemma, about if there's more done in early intervention, right? If you get some people earlier, and that could be voluntary sector, because there's more, I mean, it doesn't matter who it is, it saves, never mind the people's lives.
Yeah.
It saves money. It is cost effective. And it's awful trying to equate people's mental health challenges or their concerns to money, but that is the reality.
Well, it's horrible, isn't it? But it is the reality, like you say.
Yeah. So can I just bring it back to, what do you do now, though, to look after your own mental health when you're really literally 24/7? I imagine you're thinking about the charity and what else you can do. So how do you manage your well-being now with the sort of, because that must be stressful.
I have therapy. I had therapy about half an hour ago. I'm not going to lie. No, not half an hour ago, like half an hour before we started. Yeah. Okay. I have therapy every 2 weeks, more if I need it. And that's not because I'm struggling with an eating disorder, but that's because I definitely have struggled with anxiety, and I just want to keep well and learn about myself. And I think I do see myself as a work in progress. I'm not ashamed to admit that. I had a bit of a wake-up call, shall we say, about 3 weeks ago. I very, very well, I nearly died about 3 weeks ago. And that wasn't because of... So basically, I got COVID, and that unearthed a serious syndrome that I had, which was affecting my kidneys, and my kidneys were at 8% function when I got admitted to hospital, and my oxygen now was 15%. So I nearly didn't make it, and I nearly didn't ring the ambulance, and I nearly didn't ring 111. Well, I didn't ring the ambulance. I rang 111 in the end, because my mum was basically saying, if you don't ring it, I will.
But you mustn't have been able to breathe.
I don't know. I don't even, because I've been to some really bad difficult places. I kind of just see myself as this resilience ninja, and I got it so badly wrong. I didn't listen to myself, and by being this, like, I can do this, and it's just the charity, and I must keep, no, I'm not going to finish work at 6. I'm going to go on until 10, because I'm going to do another funding bid. And then, I'm absolutely going to go and meet that person and go and do that and go. I was not listening to myself physically or mentally at all, to the point where I still wasn't willing to call 111. Yeah. And that has been the biggest wake-up call for me. I can't tell you. So I've been out of hospital now 3 weeks. I'm still undergoing tests, but in those 3 weeks, there's been this real sense of calm. Yeah. Because I'm not willing to go back there.
But is it calm like acceptance, or I'm going to change
the way my mind, the way I've changed the way I live? Sorry, I didn't explain that very well. The calm has come from a place of, I have now had a mental word with myself and gone, I can't be all things to all people, so I'm not going to keep trying. I am being the best version of myself that I can possibly be. I don't need to prove anymore. I need to implement boundaries, and I've been putting more boundaries in place. No is not a negative. It can be a positive. And I just, every single day, I'm just very, do I want to do that? No. So I'm not going to do it.
I think no is the most important word out there now, I think. And I think that's something maybe the pandemic helped us to learn, I think. It certainly may have helped me say no more.
Nearly nearly losing my life, I feel, touch wood, because I know when my mind works, I start all great. It's like go back into old habits. But I do think it's changed my life as well.
Yeah.
So the point of telling that story is that I thought I was very mindful and very, I've got my mental health toolbox, and like I always answered the question about how do you deal with your mental health in terms of answering how do I deal with not letting the eating disorder come back in. But what I'd failed to recognize, and what I am now recognizing, is I'd not addressed all the other parts of me. Does that make sense?
That makes
sense.
Makes perfect sense. And also, just when it makes me think of what you said earlier, going back to your experience of treatment early on, whereas people were so focused on the eating disorder, they were less focused on you. In a way, you maybe were mirroring that, and then obviously you've learned exactly this idea. Yeah, I am more than this one thing of trying to keep that at bay. It's nourishing the other aspects of your mental health. I think is so important, or more widely.
And I think it's important sometimes to take a step back. I remember there was a post that I did on Instagram, and I was on holiday, and I very rarely do. You won't see much of my flesh on my Instagram. Like, I'm not like a bikini like selfie person, but on holiday I'll always post if something's relevant. On holiday I posted a picture of my bikini because I felt for the first time in a long time I'd actually gained weight. I'd lost weight during the pandemic through stress and anxiety, and I'd managed to gain that weight back. And it struck me that this is something to be celebrated. And the whole post was about mental health, and also about how I hadn't posted a picture of me in a bikini because I was so worried about what the reaction would be, because I'm the head of a eating disorder charity. And it suddenly struck me, and it was all there in this post, it suddenly struck me that I've lost my identity. Mm-hmm. So here I am, I'm allowed to be a woman on holiday in a bikini, having gained weight and embracing it, and for the first time feeling confident again. All right, Ruby, I know I did feel confident again. And
hello, Ruby.
Lo and behold, there were the overall reaction was most people completely got it, but then there were a few people who absolutely went to town on me. Yeah. There was complaints put into the charity. I mean, it was all ridiculous, but I just sort of went, oh my God, like, how, if we're always trying to live to please other people, how can we truly live?
Yeah. Well, that's the whole idea of, I mean, that's what we often describe as, it's come up in some of the other podcasts, as social perfectionism. Is if you're driven by trying to meet the expectations and standards of others, you'll always fail, because you're we call a metacognition, like you're trying to think about what you're having a thought about their thoughts, what they think of you. Yeah. And it's just those of us who are high on that sort of perfectionism is obviously, it's just unhelpful, because you're completely out of control. And there's a relationship with that and eating disorders and other obviously mental health concerns as well. So I guess, well, but you're able to, whatever your response seemed to be, that I'm not going to let this affect me though this time.
Yeah, I think I've just really started to like grow into myself and work on myself a lot, and I can't be accountable for what other people feel about me. But to your point there, and to link in with the work you do, you said about this high perfection, which is definitely a trait in me, and is in many eating disorder, I don't like to use the word sufferers, but those who struggle with eating disorders. And I always remember, because it was in my head a lot before we started the podcast, my dad always saying, I do blame myself, Gemma, because I feel like I was so sensitive growing up, and I feel like you've got that gene. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking, sorry.
For those who can't see it, Ruby is licking Gemma's face.
DAD. She knows who DAD is. She loves her granddad.
Okay.
But I remember sort of going, Dad, like, that's ridiculous. But actually, we had a chat about it one night, and I really do wonder if especially because of the way my eating disorder presented itself, it literally felt like overnight something changed in me. I think even if I wasn't bullied, this was going to happen. Does that make sense? And I do wonder if there is a serious piece and body of work that needs to be done around, is there a gene that can detect eating disorders? I truly believe there's something. I don't know what your thoughts are. I'd be interested to.
Well, that brings us nicely to, I mean, Craig, we've a couple of last questions before we try and tie it up.
I guess the question would be, what is your image of mental health research in the future?
From a perspective of eating disorders, I would love that to be looked into. I read something, and I might be completely wrong, about a year ago, and there was like this 11 million pot of funding that goes into mental health research, and only 1% of that goes on to the research of eating disorders, and that blew my mind. The biggest mental health killer of all mental health illnesses, one in 5 will die as a direct result of the eating disorder or by taking their own life, and 1% of that funding is given to that. I think that the majority of it was on depression, anxiety, and there was another one. But then I was even going, yeah, but an eating disorder is so multifaceted and complex. It often presents itself to develop depression, anxiety, OCD, like all sorts. It's not just defined by that one thing. So for me, the future, I pray, is that there is more evidence-based research around the genetics, and if an eating disorder can be detected, or I don't know, I'm not the scientist, but there definitely needs to be more input into that. Definitely.
I think it's a great question. I think it's also just looking more broadly at, so these things are never single factors. So it's looking at vulnerabilities, and yeah, so let's look at what are the genetic vulnerabilities plus the social and environmental and psychological vulnerabilities, because like any mental health problems, it's just trying to better understand who is most at risk, and then what can we do to obviously mitigate any risk is out there, and then develop intervention. So I guess that's a great question. But no, just one last one. We'll ask one last quick question, and I think it's a great one to think about is, what advice would you give your 16-year-old self? And it's in one level, it's a really...
We got another hour. What advice would I give to my 16-year-old self? Oh my God. It'll be okay in the end, and if it's not okay, it's not the end. Every time I face something now, that is the first thing that goes through my head. And I wish I'd have known that. I wish I'd have, because it could have saved me so much pain. And I don't just mean with like eating disorders, I just mean with life in general, like all those moments where, a relationship breaks down, or a friend falls out with you, or something doesn't go right in class, or you're in a moment and the mind spirals and it feels like the end of the world. Like if I just knew that I needed to just trust the process more, that would have been amazing. And the other one is just about how life can throw you curveballs, but sometimes if you follow where the curveball lands, something magical can ensue. I wish I'd have sort of been able to adapt and understand that change isn't scary. So yeah, those two.
Great change, yeah. They're brilliant ones. But one thing that's really struck me throughout is you've a whole load of great phrases. The curveball one, then the other one I live
on my own with my dog. I just sit at night and think, what can I think up tomorrow?
The other one, which was it you're stop being a resilience ninja?
I like that one.
Yeah.
I like that.
Resilience Ninja is stolen from one of my wonderful friends. You need to check her out, Jazz Amporfar. She is an inspirational speaker, and she created, in my head, she introduced me to the whole idea of being a resilience ninja. She's phenomenal, and I just love it. I love it. I like to think that we can all be superheroes in our own way.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. And no, I know, but to come back to your lesson, to your reflection to your 16-year-old self, I think that one, it comes up so important, is that things will be okay. And because one thing we wish we could tell our kids, I have 2 teenage kids, and just make them believe that actually life will be okay, and that whatever crisis you're experiencing, which we know from all the psychological and brain imaging research out there now, we know that's such a hypersensitive period for adolescents, is it?
Oh God,
Yeah. That psychological thin skin, and just anything gets through, and you think the world's never going to be the same again, and it is, and life moves on. So
is there anything that people can do, any of our listeners, to help with Seed?
Oh wow, get involved, help us fundraise. We've got some brilliant events coming up. Skydiving if you're adventurous, or even just simple things, but also just, you know, fundraising in general for us is huge at the moment. And, you know, if there are any corporates out there with their CSR hats on, hi, we do amazing work. Get in touch. But yeah, just spreading the word and sowing the seed, pardon the pun, would be wonderful.
Oh, well, Gemma, just on that note, I think just on behalf of Craig and I, what an inspiration you are, from obviously recovery to the incredible work you're doing with Seed, and just all the very best. Thanks for spending time with us. I've learned a lot from you, and the very best with the skydiving or whatever else you'll be doing.
I don't know if I'm going to be doing that one. I might just stick to the walk.
But anyway, no, thanks so much. That was brilliant, and I think our listeners will really benefit from it. So, and we'll have details on Seed and how you can help Seed in the show notes afterwards. So thanks a million, Gemma. Have a great end of whatever day today is. Goodbye.
Ruby's walking it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.